Hi, I'm Ben Shelley, and in this tutorial we're going to be building a iPhone 5 from scratch. So first of all we're going to set our project, so File, Set Project, and set it to your DigiPipeline project. And the first thing we'll need to do is import our image plane. The link should be provided in the video description. So we're going to go to View, Image Plane, Import Image, and it should take you straight to your source images folder because you've already set up your DigiPipeline project. And I'm going to import the image like this, and I'm going to leave it at the default size that it comes in. I'm also going to set it to its own layer so I can turn it on and off whenever I need to as well. So I'll just select the entire object, so the purple outline goes green. Go over to my Layers tab and click on Selected Objects to a New Layer button, and then I can turn them on and off by pressing the V icon there. I can also set it to a reference layer, which means I can't select it anymore as well, which is very useful. So first of all, we're going to create a cylinder, and we're just going to be using the outer edge of this cylinder. So I've created it roughly the right size to the outside of the phone. I can smooth it up later. Next thing I'm going to do is change it so it only has it should have 40 divisions, 40 subdivisions. So I've clicked on Attribute Editor and gone to the Poly Cylinder 1 tab and changed subdivisions axis to 40. And then jump to my top view, and I'm going to select the cylinder, go to Face, and delete everything I don't need, which is all of this. And I should just be left with the top right hand corner pretty much of that cylinder like this. Once you've got that, I'll go to Edge, and I'm going to select only these edges, these ones along the top and the one along the left side there, and I'll go to Extrude. And obviously before we extrude, we need to make sure we click on the Align or Snap to Grid button there. It looks like a power button. I'll probably refer to it as a power button later. So click on that so it turns yellow, and then you can extrude using obviously this arrow here to the left. And I'm not too fussed at the moment about how far along we drag this, but I do need to flatten this edge here. So I'll get the selected edges and click on R to resize, and just resize them in. I can do the finishing touches to that later. So just back to my top view, I just want to make sure that the top corner of the phone is actually the right size, and mine's a little bit too big at the moment. So again, we're going to model the metal outer edge of the phone from a different object. So I'm just lining this up where the edge of the screen is, which actually is down there. So you can just about make out the lines there. I'm not too fast if it's not completely accurate, but that will do. Okay, next go back to 3D view, and obviously to jump about views it is hit the space bar. Go to Edge, select only the bottom edges, so it's just these two big edges here that I'm selecting, and I'll extrude down. Again, I'll click on the little Snap to Grid button and move them down to there. And before we do anything else to this geometry, I'm going to create that metal outer edge there, and I'm going to use the geometry that we already have to do this. So I'm going to hit Control D on the selected geometry, and then I will go to my top view. What I want to do is resize it so it's just slightly bigger. Now, unless you've already centered your pivot, the pivot should be at the center of where the circle was. So if we resize stuff, it should match up nicely with the rest of the geometry. So I'm just going to resize this out a bit, just so it skips over the small gap in between where the glass screen ends and the metal frame is. There'll be a tiny groove around the edge of the phone, and this needs to be on the other side of that groove there. So I've resized it a bit, and I'll go to Face, and I'm going to just select all these faces at the top and hit delete. And again, remembering there's probably a very small one near the top that I missed, and I'm going to select that and press delete as well. And jumping back to our 3D view, you should have something that looks like this. The original geometry here, and then a resized, duplicated piece of geometry around the edge, which will allow for a small gap in between there. Next, I'm going to extrude this geometry. So I'll select the entire thing by double clicking on it, on any face, and then I'll go to extrude. And I need to choose the arrow that's pointing out perpendicular to the face it happens to appear on, which is this one here. So I'll click on extrude, and I'll jump to my top view so I can see what's going on. And I'll extrude that out to there. Okay, so it should look like this now. And obviously, because we resized it, it's gone a little bit too big, so I'm just going to shrink that down. And actually, this phone's not that fat, I know this, so I'm going to just get these vertices here and just move them all the way up to about there. And we'll sort out the size later, but I'm just going to move that up to there for now. Okay, so next we're going to go and add the bottom of this groove there. So we just need to add an edge loop to our outer metal piece of geometry, like this. I'm gonna keep it quite far down because we're gonna add a very big bevel to this outer edge, and I do not want to restrict that bevel by the time it gets to this edge here. So keep it so it's well, far enough down. It could even be halfway down if you really wanted. So to select the whole edge loop, just double click on any edge and just press W and almost move it down to the middle like that. And then I'm going to get the edges on the inside only, or the faces on the inside only. This other piece of geometry is in the way, so we need to select some geometry. So I'm going to click on this icon here, the red cursor with the green selection box, and everything else will disappear. I'm going to select these faces here, so select that face, hold down Shift, double click on the furthest face that you want to select, and it should join up in between, as opposed to doing this where you double select the entire edge of the whole object if you're unlucky. So that face, Shift, this face, and then hit extrude. And we're not going to hit the snap to grid button here, we're going to extrude in like this, and it should give us a nice curved edge on the inside of the phone. And then I'm going to select the faces at the top because I know that the phone isn't this deep. So again, click on that face, Shift, double click on that face, and then W to move them up to almost near the top again. And now your outer edge should look something like that. It doesn't really matter. Okay. And now I'm going to deselect everything. It's important you deselect everything before you click on this object again. So click Isolate, Select again, and everything else should come back. If you've got anything selected, like a face, it will obviously Isolate, Select that face within the Isolate, Select, and you don't want that. Okay, we've got this now. Now, iFrame 5 does have a big bevel around the edge, which we're now going to do. So click on this edge here, Shift, double click on the edge at the top, and then go to bevel. And if you don't have it on your shelf, it is in Mesh Tools and then the bevel tool. And whatever happens to start with, just go to Object Mode, click on your outer edge of the phone, and go to Polybevel 1. And I want to check this in the top view. I'm just going to look sort of near the edge of my geometry and where it would line up with the image underneath, and I'm just going to increase the fraction until it's about the same size as the image plane underneath. Okay, my geometry is slightly off and I really don't care, but that's about okay. So now if we go back to our 3D view, we should just have one segment in our bevel, and the bevel should look like this. It should look pretty big. Okay, next I'm going to go to object mode, and we're going to start deleting some unwanted faces around here, because we're eventually going to mirror this geometry, and we can't mirror when there's faces facing into the mirrored area. So I'm going to select these faces and hit delete, and go around to this side, and again select these faces and hit delete. I can probably actually go ahead and delete the faces on the inside of the phone as well, because we're never going to see those. Okay, and we're going to end up mirroring our phone over the other axis as well, to be honest. So I can go ahead and delete the ones at the bottom as well. So to delete the faces at the bottom, you might want to go to a side view, select everything that you know includes these flat faces that are directly on the edge of the camera that we can't see. Hold down Shift and unselect these faces that we do want to keep and hit delete. Okay, and they've gone. So just to prove that to you, I've gone to the side view, gotten down to a very sort of perfect angle, selected everything, unselected the faces I don't want, and hit delete, and they've gone. Okay, and what we'll do now is, before we mirror the geometry, it does need to be perfect. Because our bevel's at a 45-degree angle, I know it does need, and it's a very big face, I know that it needs to be beveled again, so that we have so that these edges that I'm selecting here can catch the light nicely in our renders. So go to object mode. I'm going to delete history, which should be on your shelf. If not, it's edit, delete all by type, history, and that will clean up our tabs over here as well when we select the object. Now, only delete history once you are totally happy with how big this beveled edge is. It's hard to edit later. Okay, so let's select these edges again, and just the two edges on the outer edge of the bevel, and we're going to go to hit the bevel button again. And to start with, the bevel's really big and it gives the whole phone quite a soft look to it, and I want to make these a bit sharper. So I'll click on the geometry in the attribute editor, go to poly bevel 1 and decrease the fraction quite a lot, and I'll actually give it 2 segments as well. So I'm going to decrease the fraction quite a lot. I want these edges to be fairly sharp, but I want them to be big enough to catch the light there as well. Okay, so if you zoom out, it should be look a bit nicer. So depending on what the scale of your geometry is, these numbers will be different. So if you type in 0.037, it may be different on your computer. But I've dragged it down so it looks just about like this, and it will be enough to get the highlight. Okay, so obviously 0 I know will be obviously completely useless because it won't show anything, but something around there should look quite nice. So when you zoom out, it just looks like you've got some thick edges really there. Now, every time we bevel, we need to remember that it's created some new faces at the very edge of our geometry. It's actually really hard to see because this is so small. I'll just resize to prove this to you. So there we go. So you can see there that there are 2 very small faces selected. Even if you can't see them, they are there. So I'm just going to resize my bevel down a bit. And to delete them, again, I'll go to, well, I could because there's not much detail on this mesh yet, I can go to just around this view here, select face, unselect the faces I want to keep, which is obviously all of that. And this tiny face here will remain selected, these 2 here, and then I can hit delete, and they will go away. Again, you might not be able to see much there, but it has worked. So again, I'm going to select all of these faces, which will include those 2 annoying faces. Hold down Shift, unselect everything I don't want to delete, and hit delete. And so now we should be able to mirror our geometry. If you have any problems later on, it's most likely because you've got these 2 tiny faces left behind. So whenever you bevel and it gets to the edge of the geometry like this, just be sure to select the entire edge and hit delete. Okay, let's add another bevel to the inside of the phone really quick. So I'm double clicking on the inner edge here before we get to the groove, and I will go to bevel again. I probably should have done this before we deleted those faces, because we're going to do it again now, but I'll increase the segments to 3 because we are on a 90-degree corner here, and 2. I'll decrease the fraction down and increase the segments to 3. This edge might be a bit bigger than the other ones, but not much. Again, it's just big enough to get the highlight on the edge of the phone there. Okay, I suppose it could be a bit bigger. That'll do. Okay, and now we'll go to select these faces again that I know it's generated near the end, and I'm going to hit delete. So same process again, and hit delete. Okay, so that's the outer part of our phone is actually been modelled now and ready for mirroring. We just need to set up the inside part of the phone here. So depending on how many divisions you gave your original cylinder, you may have some very small faces near the top where you've extruded the cylinder to the left, and it's given us obviously some very small faces because of the angle of that edge that we've extruded from. So this is an optional step for those of you looking to make super clean geometry. I would recommend that you go to your top view. We can go ahead and delete this edge here. And just to show you, when you delete an edge and go to vertex mode, it will leave the vertices behind that you don't need. Obviously we need this one there, but we don't want that one. So you can either delete it individually, or to be safer, when you delete any edge or an edge loop, just click on the edge. I only need to select this one, so I'm clicking on it once, and then I can do shift right click and then go to delete edge, and that will delete the edge and the vertice as well. So go to vertex mode, I can see it's clean. So that was holding down shift and right click to delete the edge. The problem that this has caused by deleting this edge, although this face is now big enough for me to work with and also big enough to bevel as well, if the edge was any smaller, the bevel would start to get constricted near the top. So what I'll do, I'll just count the faces on here so I can see it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges to this face, which I don't want. We need to only be working with 4 or 3 if absolutely necessary. So what we can do is go to mesh tools and use the multi-cut tool. And what we can do with the multi-cut tool is click on, I'm going to use this vertex here and just zoom all the way out and just create an edge going all the way down to the bottom of the phone, and then I can hit enter. And if I zoom in, I can now see, if I go to edges, that obviously this has four edges here, and this one also has 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I've avoided having a super thin face near the top, and I've instead added an edge going down there. I suppose you could keep on repeating that process if you want. If these edges were still too small, you could get rid of these edges here and make them vertical instead. And when you're using the multi-cut tool, it's really important that you do check to make sure that you have created an entire edge loop. And I know that because my geometry's not yet self-contained, I am fine because there was already an edge here, and I'm just extending that edge all the way down there, and then it hits the end there. So this is not the edge loop tool, and it can be dangerous if you start doing things on the top of your geometry like this, and then you go to the end and hit enter. You are left then with faces at the top and the bottom that have 5 sides, and we really don't want that. So just watch out for that, and just make sure you use it in conjunction with the edge loop tool, or to make sure you go all the way to find an edge of your mesh. And now that's a lot neater and will help us to bevel. So we can double click on this edge here. Again, we can delete history if we want, and then I can go to the bevel tool, and I'll go to polybevel 1 tab, or if you haven't deleted history, this will be like polybevel 8, and I'll reduce the fraction down again, and I give it 3 segments again on that bevel. I'm going to try and make it the same size as the other bevel, which I'll need to click on this button here to show the wireframe unshaded for our geometry, just so I can get an idea of how big to make it. I'll make it a little bit bigger, and that'll do fine. It doesn't really matter how big or how small your bevels are, as long as they're not too noticeable when you zoom out, but as long as you've got something there, it will capture the light when you render. And again, we know it's created this annoying face here. If you can see it on its own, hit delete. If not, select all the faces around it, unselect those faces and hit delete again, and it will go away. Okay, next we're going to mirror the inside of this phone. So we're going to just check at the bottom here. I can see I need to mirror it over the Z axis. Again, if you're not too sure, just go to your top view and check your little compass thing down here, and it's the Z axis, so that's the +Z. All I've got to do is select the geometry, go to mesh, click on the options box for mirror geometry, and choose +Z. Now we need to uncheck merge with original. I'll show you what happens if we leave it on. It will sort of squish all of the vertices that are too close together, which includes our bevels. It'll squish them all together into one vertex, which is not good. So what we have to do is go to Mesh, Options for Mirror Geometry, uncheck Merge with Original, hit Mirror, and again, it might look nice from a distance, but if we double click, and usually double clicking on an object in face mode selects the entire object or all connected faces. Here, when we double click, it's only selecting half of the phone, meaning that if we hit W, it is still two separate pieces of geometry that have been combined together. So what we have to do, just move it to the left slightly, and then we need to select all the edges on the inside. So if we double click, it might not go all the way around, or it might go around the entire phone, which is not what we want. So I'm just going to select the opposing edges, and the easiest way to do this is just to zoom out and make sure there's no other small edges nearby. Select everything, including the edges you want to mirror, which is just these inside ones here. Hold down Shift and unselect the ones you don't want, and then go to Edit Mesh and Bridge. Now when we hit Bridge, it's probably got a default of 5 divisions. We need to change that, so click on the options box by Bridge, and obviously mine is set to 0, yours might have 5 in it. Just type in 0 and hit Bridge, and it should work. If it hasn't worked, it's because you've got those annoying faces left from your bevels, which you will need to go and delete. But now that's worked, I can go to the top view, and I'm going to just select, I can either select the vertices at the bottom or select everything except the bits at the top, and move them down to the bottom of the phone just there. I need to make sure it is now lined up really neatly like this. So again, I'm not doing it to the bottom of the phone, I'm leaving room for the metal rim, and I'll move it down to there. And next, we're just going to prepare this geometry in the middle for mirroring over the -X axis. I can see if I go to the top view that I will need to consider making room for the speaker piece here. I'm guessing, I don't have an iPhone, but I'm guessing that the glass material over the top is completely flush over that webcam area. I'm not even going to bother modeling that because I know it's underneath the phone. Later on, I suppose we could model something else underneath that gives this some shape, which will capture the light nicely, and because this will be just a piece of glass essentially over the top. So what we'll do is get all the vertices pulled out until we can start seeing the edge of this. So just to show, I need to make sure I select everything along the left hand side here, and just hit W and move them in. I don't want to move them into here where the black part of the actual speaker starts. I need to start a bit further back because there is another bevel on the iPhone itself that starts. So that'll do for there. I'm going to go to the Edge Loop tool, which if you haven't got it on your shelf is under Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop tool. We're going to be modeling this to be smooth it out, which is by hitting the 3 button later. So I don't need to add too many to make this the most perfect shape in the world. I'm going to add just 6 edge loops here, so it's 3 for the top and 3 for the bottom, and if they're not completely lined up, don't worry. I'm going to add 1 edge loop vertically as well, so that when we start moving these about, the rest of the edges still keep their shape. And I'm going to just start moving these into position. So I am going to need to move these down a bit. I was slightly off earlier. And next I'm going to extrude out these edges that do not involve this part here. So you see what I mean now. I'm going to go to the edge mode. I need to select just these edges here. So I'm going to select all the way from the bottom, hold down Shift and select to here, and then I'm going to skip these new edges that I've put in there, and then I'm going to hold down Shift and select all the way to the other side of the phone where the geometry ends. So the whole left hand side of the phone has been selected except for these tiny edges here, which I've left unselected. And then I'll go to Extrude, and just make sure you click on your Snap to Grid button at the top. You'll have to zoom out to see a pivot, and just move them into the left a bit. Doesn't really matter how far, but that will do for now. Okay, let's go back to our top view, and we can start moving these vertices into place. It's kind of hard to see on the image below exactly where this shape is, but you can probably get a rough idea, and I'm going to say it should be about about there. We'll then zoom out, and I'm going to select all the vertices on the inside of the phone, being careful not to select these ones, and then just move them to the left. And obviously the middle of the phone, I'm hoping, lines up with the middle of the front camera, so I'm just going to move them to about there. It doesn't really matter if it's not completely in the middle, but that will do. So I've lined them up so they're in the middle of the webcam there, and we've extruded only the edges that do not involve the speaker mount, leaving this hole that we can sort out later. Okay, so this geometry is now ready to be flipped over the -X axis. So if we just keep the geometry selected, I'll go to the 3D view just to see what's going on, and I'll go to Mesh, Mirror Geometry, click on the options box and choose the -X axis. It might be different for you, but hopefully it's not if you've used the image plane like I've done. Just check down there, it's the -X axis, and hit mirror. And we know that our phone, as nice as it looks, is still made of two separate pieces of geometry which we have to sort out. So I'm going to move the left piece to the left. Okay, so we're going to bridge these two pieces together. Now we can only do one section of bridging at a time, even though these are still just two separate pieces of geometry. There's going to be a separate bridge up here because of this gap. So we can't just go and select the entire vertical length of the phone. We'll have to do it in two sections. So just go to your top view, zoom in, and select everything including the edges that you want to bridge. Unselect the edges that you do not want, and then hit the bridge button, which is this one here if you have it on your shelf. And do the same for the lower part as well. And again, you have to be quite careful how you zoom in and make sure you only select what you need. So I'm selecting all of these edges here, unselecting the ones I don't want, making sure that only opposite facing edges are selected, and we haven't got anything up here selected yet. And then I'll hit bridge one more time, and that will work nicely. So now we have a nice hole in the face of our phone. Next we can just select the edges around the inside of this hole here, and just make sure you can see from the top view what's going on. So jump into the top view, hit extrude, and I'm going to have to hit the snap to grid tool for this, and I'm going to hit the resize cube. So we're still extruding, so just hit extrude, and just make sure you haven't double extruded, but I'm going to resize these down to here. Okay, obviously my geometry is slightly off, but it's not too bad. So I will need to resize them like this as well, just to make sure I do keep some kind of circle going on there. What I might have to do actually is come along individually and just double click and select these edges on the inside here and just resize them so that they are a circle like that, and same with these ones like that. Okay, now if I want to be really careful, I'm actually going to have to move the geometry to the side of the phone that I can actually see how wide it is. I forgot to do that earlier. Okay, this one's slightly bigger, I'm assuming, because it's closer to the camera, but I'm going to go to the top view and just make sure if I select all these vertices here that it is as wide as it should be. So I'm using the top phone now. It looks like I was actually quite, luckily I was pretty much spot on with how wide it was. So I'm going to move that back over here for a minute. Okay, and just turn this on so I can see if it's lined up properly. Okay, that will do. So now on our phone we just need to go to edge and double click on the inside edge again and move it down a bit, just like this. Okay, and this is quite important as well. At the moment, if I uncheck this, you can see that the top edge here has some soft edges around it. I need to reselect these edges by double clicking my way around the hole here and going to, double clicking my way to all of these edges that are currently soft, and then just go to normals, harden edge. And just to show you what happened, if I zoom out now, it has got a nice hard edge around it, and that's just about right. I'm going to one more time double click on this edge here and go to extrude, and extrude it perfectly down, so snap to grid and move it down into the phone. Whoops, snap to grid, move it down to the phone, where eventually we'll have a different piece of mesh for the speaker. I would obviously like to bevel this edge here, so double click on that, go to bevel. I didn't delete history, so it's going to probably be poly bevel 2 for me, and decrease the fraction a lot. I'm just going to give it 2 segments, and it just needs to be a very small bevel, maybe just a bit smaller than the outer one or the same size, it doesn't matter too much. And I'll probably need to double click on these edges and go to soften edge. I might select all these faces and just go to soften edge. Still not entirely happy with this area here. That's better. Okay, and harden edges on that bit. Okay, now it doesn't look too bad, but again, because I love bevels so much, I am actually going to add one near the top here. Now we won't be able to bevel this because double clicking usually selects the entire edge loop. This will eventually come to a point where it doesn't know where to go, which means neither will the bevel, so we're actually going to have to do a manual bevel here. So go to insert edge loop and just put something near the top. Now it works here because we've made an extrusion down and it's a nice clean geometry here. So I'm just going to put one just almost near the top there, and then if we sort of line our camera up like this, hit W, I'm going to move it up ever so slightly just so it creates sort of an intermediate angle. I suppose if I move my camera in so it starts intersecting the geometry, you can sort of see what I'm trying to achieve here. It just creates an intermediate angle between the main face of the phone and that. And you might need to add one more in the middle for when we go to smooth this phone later as well. So what we should do now is just hit 3. So select the object and hit 3. Let's see what happens. If there are any edges that seem to be sort of flowing away really soft, so you can just about here make out some super stretching that's going on, which is, you can see shadows sort of zooming off into the distance, and that's just because the nearest edge to this side is quite far away, while the nearest edge to this side is really quite close. So I'm going to press 1 again, and I will add an edge just to contain the smooth preview by hitting 3 there. So that should contain it now. And if you hit 3, it should be a bit better. And you can just keep on adding any edge loops like that in to help contain it, but that should really be fine. So the next tutorial will be focusing on finishing off the metal outside of the phone here, creating the speaker ports, the speakers and the charging port and the headphone jack at the bottom, and how to duplicate holes within geometry.